Hi guys, here we are at part 5 of my Gilding a Wreath series. I'm taking my Tombow Mono sand eraser here and I'm just erasing some little spots that flicked off from my green paint. So if you do this yourself, take care not to do that because it's a real pain in the butt. And I thought that I messed up the paper I had a lot of those little green flicks around where the wreath will be. Some of them I could hide, other ones I covered with a white gel pen, but in the end it changes the texture of the paper and you can end up with little shiny spots, so be careful. So here I am taking my Liquitex red ink, and I have a drop of the copper there too, because in my studies of how to gild, it says to put the red ink on the porous paper so that it kind of protects the gold sizing, the glue, from seeping into the paper and spreading out, sort of thing. So it's like a layer of plastic or acrylic, because this is acrylic ink, at the base. Also, the red color apparently enhances the 24 karat gold in the end and makes it look better. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I've decided to paint red in the areas where the gold will be anyway. If you watched the video where I painted this bee, you'll see I'm painting in this swoosh area where I made that mistake where I brought the green through this area. So, but it doesn't matter, right? Because I'm just painting over it. And so I'm painting that area, and I'll just speed up the video because you don't really need to watch me paint this whole thing in red, but there's not much more to say about it. I'm just creating a base of plastic on the porous surface of the paper to protect it. Okay, so here it's interesting. I made another little error. As you see, as I bring down this red, you can see that, you see how I brought that little tail over the big part of the bottom of the bee? Well, it's supposed to be under, but when I was doing my green, as you can see, it's over, and I put the shadow underneath. I don't know how I did that, but it's very easily fixable. So I go in with my green again, and see, I'm just bringing the green over and making the bottom part of the bee dark. And I think I go over and lighten it up a bit again, and then I bring out the shadows of that little tail that goes behind the bee. But just something to watch out for, but it's easily fixed. So I'll tell you guys, this is my first gilding, doing proper gilding on a letter, like an illuminated letter, and I made tons of mistakes. I'm pointing them out usually as I go, but there's a lot of little green splatters. Oh, I'm using a number 5 Artist Loft, very cheapy synthetic brush, by the way. And my Tombow mono eraser here to erase all these little green splotches that I don't know if I wasn't taking care, or I'm actually not sure where they came from. I guess it just happens. But when I did my father's wreath after, you can go watch that video, I didn't have those problems. I was very, very careful not to let these little splotches happen. But this is the first time I did it. And of course we learn along the way lots. And I had tons of little green splotches, and that green does not lift easily. It really doesn't. And I wanted a clear white paper, right? So every tiny little speck just is glaring. You can see it. It just pops out. So I put a little bit of extra water on the little splotches and I scrub off with a clean brush. But you have to be careful, because if you scrub off the sizing on the paper, you'll end up with a, when you turn the page in the light, you can see that spot. And then I go in with a white gel pen and I try to cover up the little green splotches, and those are shiny. So it's a really delicate process to get those little green splotches off, but I ended up doing it, and some of the splotches or messed up areas were covered by the flowers in the wreath, so I was very lucky about that. Here's an example of a mistake. You see how it looks neon green? The green is bleeding out, and I don't know what I'm doing here. I think I'm trying to crisp up the line, but I'm cringing as I'm watching this, because it's just, I'm not sure how it happened either. I think there was a lot of water in that section and it sort of started bleeding outside of the line. And what I was trying to do there is crisp up the line. But that green does not lift easily, and every time I go to lift it, it leaves a neon yellow halo around the area. As you can see, it's still there, but I just decided to wait and touch it up later. So I'm still fussing with the colors in this bee. I'm going in obviously and deepening up the shadows of the ribbon that goes behind that part. It's like I can't leave the letter alone. I just won't stop. So there's a possibility that I overworked it a bit, but in the end it doesn't matter. It looks good, but as I get more practice at doing this, obviously I don't think I'll keep working it and working it. But maybe that's just the nature of the beast with watercolor, that you just you keep going until it looks to your satisfaction. However, when you do that, look what just happened there. A little bit went outside the line, and now it's made me upset, and so I have to go in and crisping up lines. So as I keep touching it, as you'll see, one tiny millimeter, if your hand goes off a millimeter, literally you've got this little dot on the side of the line, and I don't know about you, but I'm kind of a perfectionist with these things. So then I have to go in and work it some more and get rid of that little dot and etc., etc., and so on and so on. But at some point, the madness does stop. To be fair, I was painting pretty quickly there, so that's why little smudges were happening. But we're on to the next stage. After this ink dries, I have a little pot here where I made my own raised gesso preparation. So this is before I got my Instacol and my mini atom and my bowl from John Neal Bookseller, and I just made this myself. So, and I did test it beforehand. You'll see that in an upcoming video where I tested it on a bunch of D's to do my niece Dahlia's painting. I'm using an old crappy brush here that I put a piece of tape on that said for gilding. And I made this gesso out of, I just used plain white gesso. I squirted a little bit in there and I put a little bit of distilled water in there as well and thinned it down. And I also put a drop, just a tiny bit of that red ink. So, because I've also seen people making their own gesso and they always tint it pink. I guess it's so that you can see it. And that's what they used to do in the old way. So I'm using my brush here, which I put a little piece of washi tape on that says Gilded, so I know that's like my crappy brush to use with gesso and sizing and that sort of thing. And this is really hard to work with. It's way harder than Instacol because it's gesso and it dries really fast. And basically for every time I applied this, I would have to wait overnight and then give it a light sand and then do a second, third, sometimes 4 coats to get the raised gilding. I think if you're just doing a flat gilding and putting the sizing on this, that would be one thing. You could probably get away with 1 coat. But I was trying to build it up into a raised surface. So because it's not that it's not meant for that, but I made it myself, it was just really, really lengthy, tedious process. I mean, I loved every minute of it, but it really was a learning, a big learning curve here. So basically I had to find the perfect consistency of the gesso and then pool it on and wait a full night before I could go further. And it actually took 7 days to put this preparation on the bee. Yeah, so sorry about all the twists and turns in the painting, but I had to do that in order to work with this stuff. It was so difficult to do. I needed to turn the painting around and around. So I'm gonna slow down the video again and I'll show you how I do this area here in real time so you can see how long it takes. So you know how there's multiple ways you can arrive at a solution with various things? Well, this is one of them. This just happens to be the most difficult way, making your own gesso and learning as you go, not really knowing what you're doing. Because when I got the Instacall, it was a lot easier. But so I'm just painting this on, and sort of like the Instacall, you sort of float the bead, you float it in. So I'm grabbing areas there and then just sort of making an outline, and then putting a glob on my brush and touching it to the other part so it connects and then floats over. The problem is because there's water in the gesso, when it dries, it flattens out even more. So the bubble that I see here is not the bubble I get the next day after it's dry. And I literally did this for about, 4 nights. I left it a whole night to dry in between each one. So I did it 4 times to get the raising that I wanted. So in the end, I arrived at the solution. I just took the really long, painful way. So if you have the right product, though, it's a lot easier if you buy the Instacall or some Miniatum. And here I was playing with fire, and I did something exceedingly stupid and was erasing with my Tombow sand marker while the gesso was wet right beside it and scraping the shavings around. And I thought to myself, oh, that's stupid. You should stop doing that right now. So I did. Okay, so here I'm going in, just fixing up all the little tiny, sorry, my dog's sneezing in the background, all the little tiny green spots, and putting the gel pen on them, trying to hide them. That was just, I don't even think you can see them all here. There's a lot that I didn't film. It just took so much time, but it ended up working out in the end, thank goodness. So here I'm using a Signo white gel pen. I just find them better than the Jelly Roll pens. And these little containers, I think I got them at Michael's, and I just made the gesso in that. And then I have another little container here that I marked sizing on, and that's the Mona Lisa sizing, just the cheapy kind that you get at Michael's. Okay, here we're getting into the sanding portion. So I didn't have any, well, I went and looked for some sandpaper, so I didn't buy this specially. I had this fine sandpaper sanding block. So I'm very, very carefully and gently sanding this gesso. And this is what I didn't like about it, is as you can see, I bring the camera up here really close, but there's little pock marks, and it doesn't end up flowing smoothly. One area is really bad, like in the middle of the bee there, and it was just a real pain in the butt. And picture, okay, so I thought my gesso was nice and thick and raised, but after every night it settled down, so it went to about half. And then so I did this whole putting on the gesso and then sanding it like this, and then putting a little bit more on to raise it up, and then sanding it down again. And each time I do that, a whole night has to go by where it dries fully. And if it doesn't dry fully, then you can smear it around and stuff like that. So sometimes it could actually dry in 12 hours. It didn't have to be overnight. It's just I really wanted to make sure. So this process was pretty crazy. I have so much respect for the illuminators and scribes that decorated the ancient manuscripts and the Bible pages, because I would so love to see them. I'm sure they're absolutely stunning, and I would really like to see some real ones up close. Anyway, this process is has quite the learning curve, but it's definitely worth doing. Okay, we finally made it to the last stage of the putting on the sizing. So I have my special crappy paintbrush with the washi tape on it for gilding, and I've got my little sizing container with the Mona Lisa sizing in it, and you can see my very fine sandpaper block off to the right there. And what I didn't know is I think you can add a little bit of water to that sizing to make it easier to work with. But I'm trying to remember now. I don't think I had a problem working with this sizing. It was relatively easy. The problem was getting the raised surface, which was the gesso. So now putting the glue on it is not too bad, but I think you can mix a little bit of water in this. I'm not sure though. Make sure you read the package. I can't remember, but if I didn't mix water in it, I probably should have. And I literally have cat and dog hair in everything. So I know it's hard to see here the actual application of applying this clear sizing to the dots, but I started off with the first 4 dots just to get to know this sizing and how the gold applies and to see how hard or easy it is. So I just started off with those 4 things. And I take care to wash my brush after every application right away with a little bit of warm and with a tiny bit of soapy water in it. Okay, I'm going to leave putting on the actual gold until the next video. So I hope you enjoyed this installation of the Gilding a Monogram Wreath, my series, and please stay tuned for the next video, which is actually putting the gold on, and it's a really beautiful and rewarding process. So drop me a like, subscribe if you care to. Thank you so much for watching. Drop me a comment too. I love to read those and see what you guys think of my work. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.